So I'm joined here today for an interesting chat with Renton Patterson, President of Civil Rights in Public Education, CRIPE. And today we're going to talk a little bit about the public funding of denominational schools in Canada and the issue related to that and what that has to do with secularism, humanism, and basically human rights and religious freedom in Canada. So, hello, Renton.
Hello there.
How you doing?
Pleased to be here.
Yeah, nice to thanks for joining me in this conversation today. So, just as a background, could you tell me a little bit about how you became aware of and involved in this issue related to civil rights and public education?
Well, way back, I was a teacher. That was my second occupation as a teacher at a high school, and along came the Davis announcement about full funding for separate schools. And we had there was a meeting went on in an auditorium in Pembroke, and three of us got together and thought we'd better and dig more into this issue and see what's going on and see what could be done about it, because we didn't believe it was fair. And so actually, as things moved on, we formed, CRIPE is the third version of our group. We started off as Friends of Public Education, and we in Ontario Incorporated, based in Essex, Ontario, and now we're based in Pembroke as CRIPE. But early on, I became aware of the fact that the United Nations was interested in promoting human rights around the world, and they had a program whereby you could submit a complaint if you had a violation of the human rights in that country. So we hired a lawyer, and we didn't need to hire a lawyer, but we did hire one. And we made a submission to the United Nations. It was called TADMAN number 816/1998. And that was submitted. And then we found out that there was a previous submission made by a gentleman called Ariel Waldman. It was number 694/1996. And there was quite a bit of movement here. The UN wanted to know whether we wanted to put them together or not, and all that sort of thing. But it took a long time for it to be resolved. But in the meantime, after we made our submission, the Roman Catholic community in Ontario became very upset about our attempt to interfere with the public funding of their schools.
What a surprise.
So, yeah. So at some period in 1998, I'm reading from my records here, the Ontario Catholic School Trustees Association submitted a legal document to the Human Rights Committee, and that these sort of things were not really supposed to be. It was entitled "In the Matter of Tadman versus Canada." It numbered 41 pages and had an appendix of 12 pages. So it was a well thought out proposal. And this document vigorously defended the discriminatory public funding of Roman Catholic school systems. English and French, with the incredulous argument the Roman Catholic adherents in Ontario were in a minority, if you can believe that. Anyway, this, as our submissions were dealt with at the UN, Waldman was passed, and our submission was deemed inadmissible.
Okay.
And I think the suspicion is that well, that was the first one. Then we submitted another one called Waldman 694 1996. Oh, that was 1998. Pardon me. And the that was deemed inadmissible right away. And
Right.
our lawyer, which was an experienced lawyer who had dealt with the Hong Kong veterans at the United Nations, and he had made trips to the United Nations. He knew how the system worked, and he knew people over there. But that submission of his was rejected as inadmissible. He wrote a letter trying to get an explanation of what was going on. He received no answer at all. And to follow up on that,
Yeah.
in later years, we submitted, well, actually 2020 and 2020, we got back onto it and submitted another one, and it was deemed inadmissible right from the start. It wasn't even given a file number.
Okay. And where what part of the UN the UN is a big is a big place. So what part of the UN did you submit that in 2020? Did
The UN,
Human Rights Council?
the Human Rights Council and the Human Rights Committee, they're both the Human Rights Committee is the one that receives these submissions.
Yes.
And my suspicion was that the Roman Catholic document had an influence in prompting UN actors. Now, unfortunately, or whatever, the Vatican has a place at the United Nations.
That's right. The Holy See. The Holy See is an organization around the table with other UN countries deemed as effectively a country.
That's right.
Yes.
And it's possible that this Roman Catholic document, had an influence. This submission, this legal submission, to prompting UN actors to develop a scheme to intimidate or threaten UN personnel to block any human rights submission they thought might be directed against the Roman Catholic Church.
Interesting.
And that's my suspicion.
Yeah.
And I have been blocked 4 times. 4 submissions have been made. They've all been blocked. And the last 2 did not even receive a file number. They just disappeared.
Interesting. Okay, so I want to go into that a little bit more in terms of the role of the UN in terms of and their view on this with respect to human rights and human rights violation. But just for people as a kind of introductory perspective on what this issue is, what we're talking about here is public funding of denominational schools, particularly, for example, in Ontario, the Roman Catholic school boards in Ontario, but also other religious based educational systems which are funded within respective provinces for in exclusion of any other kind of religious education or whatnot, which is available to people, right? That is, say, there's a kind of how would you call it, a privilege being exercised on the part of these faith-based schools, right? Right. So with respect to the issue, what is the now, and the foundation for that has to do with it's sort of systemically entrenched in the Canadian Constitution, right?
Yes, but it could be changed.
Yes, we do have now, under the 1982 Canadian Constitution Act, our current Constitution, a mechanism for amending the Canadian Constitution, which we can talk about in a moment. But one of the things I think that people may may or may not realize is that this entrenchment of denominational schools had as its objective to try and deal with people in a minority religious set of circumstances, and entrench that directly into the Constitution as a way of protecting religious rights.
Religion. What rights have religions?
Well, rights to religions.
They have rights to support themselves and do what they like to do, but government money in a religion is a no-no.
Okay, so I looked at this then quickly from a kind of a secular perspective. From a secular viewpoint, the idea of people having the right to follow whatever religion they have, or whatever religious belief or non-belief that they have, it's up to them, right? They have the right to do that. So
sure.
So we're not talking about necessarily impeding the rights of others, but more respecting the rights of others, including the rights of the rights for freedom of conscience or freedom of non-belief. Right. So what would be, in terms of fairness and kind of neutrality, the idea of a secularist perspective, in principle, is to just allow anybody to, any religion to have their own respective schools, on the assumption that it would be fair that either you fund them all or you fund none of them.
Right.
That's
the only fair way to do it. Fund nobody or fund everybody.
Yes. But the idea of just funding some in certain places at certain times under certain historical circumstances is like the least fair way to go about this, I guess.
Oh, certainly.
Yeah. So one of the reasons why, well, anyway, yeah. So to what extent then are, for example, the Roman Catholic school boards in Ontario funded by the public purse?
To what extent?
Yeah, are they entirely funded by them, or do you have a sense of how much money we're talking about?
Yes, I do. I can get that one out.
I don't want to dig through some of the binders. You've got so much information there, Renton.
I have.
I can give you a quick example, actually, for because I've looked at this up for Ottawa.
Okay, well, actually, I have a copy of one of the Roman Catholic School Trustees Association annual reports.
Oh, nice. Okay, yes.
Actually, I made a submission to the government asking for freedom of information. I wanted a copy of all the financial doings of the Roman Catholic School Board and the public school boards.
Okay.
I asked for both.
Mm-hmm.
I got an answer saying it was rejected. And the reasons they gave were something about employment and insurance and all this sort of thing. It had nothing to do with all I wanted was the financial records to compare. And they refused these, and I could appeal it. But I said, if I appeal it, they'll either say no, or else they will write, the Roman Catholic entity would write a one especially for me, and show how it's, a falsification. So I have a copy of one of their reports.
Okay.
And in it, they charge every Roman Catholic school board in the province a certain fee based on the number of people, I guess. And there are a number of them, and the total amount is $1,856,475. That's how much they collect from the Roman Catholic school boards to fund the trustees association.
Okay.
And one of their expenses is political advocacy.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And they have it listed as that political affairs and government relations, etc., $60,000, but the total is $155,400.
Yeah, and that was one. Was that just one school board, or what was that?
That's the Roman Catholic Trustees Association. So
Trustees Association. Okay.
That looks after all the school boards.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
So this $1,856,000 comes from the school boards. Of course, the school boards are funded by the province.
Mm-hmm.
That's our money.
Right.
So you can take a look at this and say that, well, 2/3 of that money is from public school supporters.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's where it goes.
Wow. Yeah, that's incredible. So the idea is that what are you advocating? Are you advocating that money? What are you proposing? That money not be spent or be redirected, or what? What are you proposing?
Well, they're looking after themselves, absolutely.
Yeah.
And the money is supposed to be for the school system. And of course, this is the School Trustees Association.
Yeah.
But they spend it the way they want.
Yeah.
And 2/3 of that money is from public school ratepayers.
Yeah. Okay.
So and one of the things that I suspected, I went a little further than this. I said, well, there's a lady called Duchesne, Miss Duchesne, and she is in a legal position because she was abused by a priest as she was a youngster, and I'm speculating. I'm saying, okay, all this money is collected. How much of that money is spent on lawyers to fight against this woman in court?
Wow. Yes.
So we don't know what I know some of this money goes.
Yeah.
But where does it go? I mean, that's why I wanted a little information on it. And I'm speculating.
Yeah.
That a lot of that money goes to pay lawyers to fight against persons like Miss Duchesne that was abused as a child.
Mm. So one of the things, of course, that one of the ways in which sort of religious privilege is expressed for faith-based schools is preferential treatment for charitable tax status. That is to say, the Roman Catholic school boards not only receive a lot of funds directly from the provincial government, but also receive charitable tax status as charities and can fundraise as charitable organizations, and therefore get exemptions in terms of not having to pay taxes and things. So this is another way in which the school boards are funded either directly or indirectly. So anybody can take a look, and I can perhaps share with you an example of this with respect to the Ottawa Catholic District School Board. And perhaps if I can share my screen here, I can give you an idea of what this looks like. CRA has a way for people to look at charities. Every charity has by law to submit financial information on the status of their charity. So this is just one example, the Ottawa Catholic District School Board, and they must submit reports annually. In 2022, almost all of their revenues came from government. They operate 69 elementary schools, 16 secondary schools, 4 adult high schools. The total revenue coming to this one school board is $631 million, of which from the government directly, provincial government, $600 million. Of their expenses, they have $616 million in expenses, of which $600 million is referred to as charitable programs. They have some 4,672 full-time employees, 460 part-time employees, of which they're spending in salaries $500 million. They're paying $39 million in consultants, and those would be the lawyers you're talking about. This is just 1 year. And there are several people who have high compensation. There's one person in this board who's being paid somewhere between $250,000 to $299,000 a year. That's somebody's salary. 6 people in that school board alone have salaries of between $160,000 and $200,000 a year. And so this is an interesting snapshot. I'll just as you said, this is all public information on the Government of Canada websites. They have some $60 million in cash sitting in a bank accounts. They have receivables of $126 million. They have land and assets. That's the actual schools themselves, worth $773 million. And other capital, I don't know, whatever that may be, other materials that are in the schools were $64 million. Total assets of this school board alone is $714 million. And their liabilities are $574 million. Some interesting fun facts. They receive gifts. That's non-cash gifts, such as vehicles and things, worth $95,000 in last year alone. And they received total revenue received from federal government. This is direct federal money, $1 million. And then they get interest on their own investments of almost $600,000. That's interest on their huge bank accounts, I guess, and investments that they have. And they receive rental income of $1.5 million. And an interesting fact: they have total revenues from sales of goods and services. This is selling goods and selling services. This is a school board now, from which they generated almost $29 million in revenue. So the question then becomes, what is this 600? We have the $600 million plus in direct funding, and this other charitable status has also a significant impact, bringing their total assets up to $714 million on land versus $773 million. So this is an interesting picture of one school board in Ontario, one Roman Catholic school board in Ontario. And what do you think of that, Renton?
That's amazing. That's absolutely amazing.
Yes.
I would never have thought anything like that could happen.
Right. And so
so is there public school boards in there on that too?
That's right. Yes, you can look that up too. Yeah, look that up separately. You can look at the Waterloo Catholic School Board and other school boards. I can only assume that in Toronto it's more. Some inconceivably high number more. I don't know what that is. Anybody can look that up. That would just be a guess. So when we're talking about um, uh, preferential treatment, um, this preferential treatment is entrenched in Canada's constitution, right? Can you talk a little bit about that? Why this is what how does this connect to the constitution?
Well, I'm not. Let's see now. Well, the Constitution. People keep telling me about Section 29, which protects the funding of the school boards in Ontario. And what about the notwithstanding clause
Yes.
to be used there? The government does not want to do anything to disturb the public funding.
Mm-hmm.
I have that's what I've concluded. In fact, I got a letter from the Minister of Justice of Canada, and he says I complained about the funding, and he said, "Oh well, you must realize that I mentioned the fact that Canada has been censured by the United Nations due to the Waldman submission
Mm-hmm.
way back when, and subsequently any submission to do with the school board by me or our organization has been deemed inadmissible because they just wanted to throw them out. And this message from the Honorable David Lametti says that this is an issue that's under the jurisdiction of the province, and you might want to talk to the province. But if you look up in the website of the Canadian government, they'll tell you what a treaty means. A treaty means an international agreement concluded between states in written form and governed by international law. And Mr. Lametti said that these treaties are not binding. But if you look up in the government thing, it says Article 26 of Section 26 of the Convention states that every treaty in force is binding upon the parties to it and must be performed by them in good faith.
Mm-hmm.
And Article 27 states, which Mr. Lametti says it's the provinces, a party may not invoke the provisions of its internal law as justification for its failure to perform a treaty. So here we have the government indicating what the treaty says and what it's supposed to do, and then we have the Minister of Justice saying it doesn't apply, it's not binding. And they put me off to the provincial government.
Wow.
And the provincial government deals with education, but the provincial government does not deal with discrimination.
Mm-hmm.
Discrimination is if it's caused by any law, and it's discrimination, period. Yeah. It doesn't matter whether it's a school board or a company or a factory or anything else.
I just like to talk just briefly about how this is seen as some form of discrimination. If to what extent is preferential treatment a form of discrimination? What would you say to somebody who just looked at the numbers that we just shared just now and say to themselves, "What's wrong with that? Schools should receive funds." And the Roman Catholic school boards have every right, as guaranteed by the Constitution, to receive this funding. What do you say to those people who say, "Don't see anything wrong with it"?
Well, it's money that could be spent for everybody, not just one organization.
Yes.
It's.
You're saying it's financially inefficient? Is that what you're saying?
Well, it's inefficient, it's discriminatory, and It's just something that is wrong.
Okay.
Just something that is not morally correct.
Not morally correct. On
wrong.
moral grounds, it is on the grounds of it being essentially unfair.
Oh yes, absolutely. Unfair is a kind of a mild word for it,
Mild
but
word for it. But it's not equality in terms of I guess if from any person in any other religion would ask, why does the Roman Catholic school school board get this treatment and no other religion? And the answer there is because it's written into the Constitution.
yeah, it goes way back to the deal between Ontario and Quebec when they formed the country of Canada.
Right.
And the Quebec people wanted their religion in it included, so that was included. So it's foisted upon Ontario by Quebec. It was terms of the Constitution.
Yeah. Now there are other ways, of course. Back then, that was sort of like the way to handle things in terms of religious fairness and stuff. Can you think are there other ways in which you can respect freedom of religion, but not do it this way in terms of funding, direct funding? Can you think of other ways?
Well, freedom of religion means it's you can have a religion and nobody's going to monkey with it. You know, you're free to have a religion and thoughts of your own, and that's it. But there shouldn't be any money involved by anybody. It's got nothing to do with religion. That's got to do with some form of illegal or a shady deal or whatever.
Mm-hmm. So, are you advocating, or would you prefer that for those parents who want those Roman Catholic parents who want their children to receive religious instruction? What are you proposing, that they fund this themselves directly through some kind of separate private direct funding? Is that what, or what?
Well, certainly,
what are you?
They're open to have their own private schools, same as everybody else is. Sure.
Yeah.
And actually, if you look at the results of the last survey done by what's his name? I forget the name. But anyway, the 51% of Catholic parents would prefer to have not prefer to have the Roman Catholic schools funded.
Okay.
51% of Catholic school parents.
Yeah.
And
So,
more than 75% of the public and of other political persuasions.
mm-hmm. Well,
so if the public, the public in general, does not want separate school funding, including 51% of Roman Catholic parents.
Yeah.
So why is it there?
Yeah.
The government, to me, the government wants to keep it. The government could get rid of it in a stroke of a pen. But the government of Canada does not. It defies the censure by the United Nations Human Rights Committee.
Yeah. Although I expect some people would say, hold on a minute, Renton, that doing a constitutional amendment takes much more than a stroke of a pen. One can imagine that there is a lot of, they sort of good luck with that. If you're trying to change the Constitution.
Stroke of the pen, notwithstanding clause. It's been used by Quebec. It's been used by Ontario.
Yes. Yeah, that's true. For those who would say that this is a constitutional thing, it's pretty heavily entrenched. You're really it's a very tall tree that you're barking up. That in fact, the Constitution has been amended a couple of times with respect to this particular issue, and that Article 97 of the current Canadian Constitution, 1982, has been amended with respect to faith-based schools in Quebec, and also has been amended again with respect to denominational schools in Newfoundland and Labrador.
Right.
And in both of those cases, the constitutional amendment was pursued, and successfully so, in two more instances for two other provinces. And so what we're talking about then is, yes, a constitutional amendment, but it's not the impossibility that one might think. In fact, it has been done a couple of times before.
Well, certainly, yes.
Yeah.
Well, there's something which could be a little deeper here,
Yes.
and that is there is a Roman Catholic organization called Opus Dei. Have you heard of Opus Dei?
Oh, tell me a bit about that.
Well, I will read the reviews of some of the persons that wrote books about it. What is Opus Dei? Opus Dei is an efficient machine run to achieve worldly power, wrote investigative reporter Penny Lerno in her book, People of God. Another one from Gordon Urquhart. Opus Dei pursues the Vatican's agenda through the presence of its members in secular governments and institutions, and through a vast array of academic, medical, and grassroots pursuits. Its constant effort is to increase its presence in civil institutions of power. Their work in the public sphere breaches the church-state division that is fundamental to modern democracy. This is written by Gordon Urquhart, author of The Pope's Armada, Unlocking the Secrets of Mysterious and Powerful New Sects in the Church, written in 1995.
Mm-hmm.
Another one by Robert Hutchison. Opus Dei uses the Catholic Church for its own ends, which are money and power. Its members form a transnational elite. They seek to colonize the summits of power. They work with stealth, holy discretion, and practice divine deception. Robert Hutchison wrote in the introduction to his book, Their Kingdom Come, Inside the Secret World of Opus Dei.
Oh, wow,
Now,
that's amazing. Go ahead.
I believe that Opus Dei is responsible for a lot of what's going on here.
Oh, so you feel it's active here in Canada?
I think it's active here in Canada, and I think it's active. In fact, I spoke to a former member of the executive of the Ontario Public School, the Secondary School Teachers Federation, and he said we had two Opus Dei members in the Ministry of Education, and he knew them by name, and he named them for me. So they are in as it says, increased presence in civil institutions of power.
Can you point to any specific action, decision, law, or thing that was done that you could point that you can somehow link to Opus Dei?
Well, I made 4 submissions to the United Nations against the funding of Roman Catholic schools. They were all blocked.
Mm-hmm.
And the Vatican, of course, is a member of the United Nations.
Yes.
And the Vatican has members of Opus Dei. And
Wow.
if they want power, they go to the UN.
Mm-hmm.
The Vatican just puts them in there, or where they work their way in. And why did Joe, the Premier of Ontario, on the same day that the motion to strike was put up by the government, Ontario fought to to have the motion struck, and they won. I mean, the next day that occurred.
Wow.
I believe that it's in provincial governments, Ontario provincial government.
Mm-hmm. Wow. That'd be interesting.
I have made submissions to Mancini, who's to do with the in international these people that foreign interference,
mm-hmm.
and to Melanie Joly. I've written to both of those persons.
Mm-hmm.
I said, look into this because you're looking after foreign interference. Here's a first perfect example.
Oh wow!
I've contacted CSIS, the Canadian Security and Intelligence Service. Of course, you don't get an answer from them, and things have to be written in and briefly, and they won't answer, of course,
mm-hmm.
and they won't discuss it with you. You can't do anything. You can't phone them. You can't talk to them. You can just make a submission.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know what's going on in there. I'm hoping they're looking at it, but I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Well, if that's the case, it makes it sound like the submission that Humanist Association of Ottawa did were quite lucky to have what our submission was accepted and is part of the Universal Periodic Review process, and we managed to get standing. For step one, get standing as a civil society organization, and so they created an account so that we could make a submission, and that then we put our submission in with respect to this and other issues, and it was a very tight time frame window in which we could submit something, and so we met all the criteria, and we followed all of their rules in terms of how many words it has to be, etc. So a lot of technical. There's a lot of technicalities they could use to throw it out, and so having learned the lessons from before, and so we submitted in, and they accepted it. So it's part of the process. Now, what they do with it, now that it is accepted in the sense that it has a file number, we'll see. We will see what happens next, but at the very least, it's in the mix there somehow.
I'm very happy to realize that you were working on this and you did it and you got it done, and that's great. I looked at it and I thought, well, I'll take a different tack, and I have a bunch of little articles that I've submitted to sent to different persons.
Yes.
And to make it kind of for people to know about it.
Yes, for people to know about it, and I agree with what you're saying, that Renton, this issue can be approached from a variety of different tacks, and
yes.
So the more the merrier in terms of looking at this from different perspectives, from most especially from a financial perspective, showing that this is a duplication in terms of expenditures, and you can just look at it purely from that perspective. The crux of the Humanist Ottawa submission was that it is a violation of Article 1819 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. That it is in violation of freedom of thought, freedom of religion, including disregard for non-belief. The idea in terms of freedom of thought and freedom of conscience is that if the government were, we talked about before, fund them all or fund none of them. If you fund them all, that seems to be fair to all religions if you fund them all, except for the non-religious. That's the one group that it is unfair to.
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
So that doesn't seem to be a viable option if you're talking about fairness.
Right.
Right. So yeah. Now, and so one of the things that we could have gotten into, we didn't have we didn't have time in terms of our UN submission, is to look at alternatives. I mean, since 1867, when this was written into Canadian Constitution, there have been many other solutions to this problem of religious freedom and religious expression. And I'll just mention very briefly, we touched upon one, which is just fund it yourself. Right? If you want religious education for your kids, fund it yourself. And of course,
Yeah.
the United States, an example of this is the Children's Scholarship Fund, directly privately funded for various religious foundations offering scholarships, financial assistance to families seeking religious education for their kids. That's one way. But there are several other ways in which we can do this rather than direct funding by government. If the objective is recognition of freedom of religion and freedom of thought, then you can in France, for example, they include in public schools and within the secular educational system instruction on neutral instruction on with respect to all kinds of religious beliefs, that students receive instruction that of what all the various religions believe, right? And they have extracurricular courses, one called Enseignement Moral et Civique, Moral and Civil Education, and Enseignement Religieux, Religious Education. These courses are optional courses which allow students to get learn about different religions and philosophical perspectives, including secularism. So you can have public funding of that within one school system, within one publicly funded school system. You can give people a fair and balanced perspective in terms of awareness of religious instruction. Yet again, another possibility has to do with perhaps an educational tax credit system, right? And that in some jurisdictions, you have a free school system. For example, in Sweden, they have something like this, which is a educational tax credit system, which allows parents to choose from amongst various schools, including religious schools, as long as they meet common educational standard, right? And that they can receive either a tax credit or a voucher that's used to cover the cost of tuition at schools, at a school of their choice, including religious schools. So the concept then would be, if I am Muslim and I want my kids to receive Islamic education, or if I'm Hindu and I want my kids to receive Hindu religious education, that a generic voucher or tax credit is given to all parents, and they can, if they want to spend this in some way or another, they can go ahead and do that. And that's something that's being done in Sweden. So there are a variety of that. Those are just a few, but there are other ways in which religious education can be recognized, and freedom of religion and freedom of thought can be recognized without this kind of religious privilege and discrimination being expressed within Canada.
Yeah, very good.
Yeah.
Yeah, you got to look to other countries too. Like, how do they do this? Because it's, I mean, the religions around the world, and how do people handle it?
Yeah. In the UK, for example, they have something called RE, which is religious education curriculum in England, for example, and they have mandatory subject within the educational system is instruction on various religious beliefs, including secular worldview. So that is mandatory within a state-funded school system, and that's how they do it. That's how they do it in the UK. So my point being that that we don't need to do it this way. Other countries do it differently, and there's no reason why we can't do it that way as well. And we can see in the case of one school system in Ottawa how hundreds of millions of dollars are being spent.
Very good. Very
Yeah.
good.
Yeah. What can people do, Renton, for with respect if they're concerned about this issue? What can what's action? What action practically can people do?
Well, I had a number of, I think I had 15 posts go out under, they're on the net under upsetting.ca. And one of the last ones was, somebody do this. Somebody uh, uh, make somebody else make a submission to the UN besides me.
Mhm.
Somebody from a different, a further region of Ontario, people from Alberta, Saskatchewan, and not one person responded to that. Not one person. And I'm here sitting here doing all this alone, and I can't do it alone.
Mm.
I need people like you. I'm so happy to have you people involved, and to know that you've made a submission to the UPR. That's great. I almost started to that, and then I went on a different tack.
Mhm.
Uh, but that's coming up in November, I believe.
That's right. Canada's review is scheduled for this coming November, where Canada's submission, UPR submission. I give people if they don't know what UPR is, just a quick highlight that since 2009, countries are being reviewed by the UN Human Rights Council on a cyclical basis. So they go through all the countries, and then once they've reviewed all the countries, they go through them all again. It basically takes 5 years to do review of the world, and then they cycle through it again. And this review is a review of the human rights record and status of each country. And so Canada has gone through 3 cycles of universal periodic review. And so the 4th cycle is in progress now, and it's Canada's turn to be reviewed in 2023. And that's going to be coming up this November, where Canada will defend its human rights track record. And that's where Humanist Ottawa submission has been submitted as part of that cycle to respond to. Now, in that review, the 47 countries of the UN Human Rights on the Human Rights Council have an opportunity to question Canada on its human rights, and when we can at this point push for those countries to ask to turn up the heat and ask questions about this. So perhaps these other countries are unaware of the extent to which religious privilege is being directed towards one particular faith, and it's being systemically entrenched. In our submission, we refer to this as systemic faithism.
I'm so happy you've done that. I'm so happy.
Oh, glad. Okay.
I got started on it, and I got swamped. There was so much that it was involved, and so many rules, regulations, and everything. And
yes,
I just said, well, I'll do something else. And I was so happy to learn that you guys were doing it, and it's done. That's great.
Yes,
because Canada needs that. For other countries to be exposed to what you've submitted and know about it, it's great. And
yes.
it's just, I'm so happy.
Oh, great. So, in terms of next steps, I agree that perhaps they can go first of all, navigate to the CRIPE website, right? And learn
the
more
website.
about this issue.
Well, the website's good, but yeah, upsetting.ca has got
Upsetting.
upsetting. www.upsetting.ca.
Okay, upsetting.ca.
And with these posts that I've made on that are located there, I have sent to 885 different people, 24 members of CRIPE, 16 embassies of countries. Those are the ones that were associated with Canada in this review. 328 to the House of Commons, 25 to human rights organizations, 10 to journalists, 2 to Ontario Greens, 123 to Ontario MPPs, 163 to the organization Open, 11 to One Separate School System Network, 8 to Other, and 83 to school board trustees in Ontario, and 22 to every United Nations address I could get. And I did this through Campaign Monitor, which is an organization which is meant for commercial purposes mostly, I guess, but they I used that, and they tell you when when the email is opened, what time it was opened, whether they opened a link that was in the email, and all that sort of thing. And so I got a complete review, and I noticed that the Ontario government opened every one of them. No, the federal government opened every one of them. Had it opened by a secretary or somebody, so they opened. And these were sent out like to all these organizations. They all know what's going on.
Okay.
And because that's the only outlet I have is I'm all alone here.
Yeah.
Except with you guys, but we're not associated, but we're doing the same thing.
Yeah.
And that's all I could do was let everybody know.
Okay. So they can go to your website and learn more. And you're a nonprofit organization, so people can donate funds to cover your costs. Can they?
Well, I used to put out a newsletter. I put out 168 newsletters over the 37 years I've been involved in this.
Wow.
And that was the only collection was to provide postage and printing for the newsletter. So I don't have any expenses. We have a bank account that we can that is still there. So I'm not asking for any contributions.
Well, actually, on the other hand, since I'm at the other end of the spectrum, I will say that we do need funds. Humanist Ottawa is looking for donations to support activities like this. So we are a nonprofit organization which pursues not only this as a human rights issue, but a wide variety of other humanist issues in Canada. Too numerous to mention here, but just to mention that if people do want to make a donation to Humanist Association of Ottawa, we'd be happy to accept your funds and your volunteer participation if you want to help to pursue this advocacy going forward to see greater fairness, less discrimination, reduction of religious exercise of religious privilege, and against violation of human rights of freedom of thought, religion, and expression.
Excellent.
Okay, sounds great. So I want to thank you very much, Renton, for this interesting chat. Hopefully, this is part of a longer conversation that we can have going forward about as we move the ball forward somewhat. In terms of raising people's awareness of this issue as a humanist and secular issue in Canada.
Yes, and I would just like to say again that the government of Canada is against me anyway. They don't. In fact, I got a letter from. I wrote Bob Ray. Bob Ray is the representative of Canada to the United Nations, and human rights is on his list.
Yes.
And where have I got his? What's that here? Bob Ray right here. I asked him about, I was getting blocked by these entities at the United Nations, and I asked for help for him to help getting them through. And he replied, "The independent status of the mandate holders is crucial for them to be able to fulfill their functions in all impartiality. As such, the Government of Canada is not in a position to ensure that the CRIPE submission to the rapporteur is expedited without further delay." Now, the first sentence tells everything. I'm not talking about the content of the submission. I'm talking about the submission that I made. I want to get to the next step. And that's totally independent of any function of impartiality. It's got nothing to do with interfering with the decisions or anything. It's it's been blocked, move it from this position to the next one. And he has refused based on that sort of reason, independent status of the mandate holder, which is just a red herring. It's just a diversion.
Yes.
To put as an excuse.
Yes.
So if he's against this, and he represents the government of Canada at the UN, and he will not support a submission of a complaint to the United Nations.
Right. So, yes, I guess that places him definitely in a major conflict of interest situation, in the sense that if he is there at the UN to represent Canada and the federal government and its actions, decisions, and what it does or doesn't do, then any submission which is critical of that invites him to essentially shoot himself in the foot. And he's not going to do that. He's there to represent the position of the federal government, and as his employer and as his client, or whatever you want to put it that way. He's there to express the federal government's view, not any criticism, not any critique or criticizer of the federal government. So that would be sort of like on the other side of the fence for him.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So then it falls to many civil society organizations, such as any humanist organization, any secular organization, which is outside of government and is independent of government, to do that. And it requires at the UN some significant knowledge of the very bureaucratic processes that are out there to affect change. So yes, Humanist Ottawa is an associate member of Humanists International, and which is configured to navigate these kinds of international waters. And so we've received some significant assistance in terms of our what to do for the UPR, but other ways in which we can go higher to international bodies and on the basis of international law. So yeah, so there you can do work within the Constitution to change this and try to do this work internally, or you can go beyond and outside of that and work at it from an international perspective. And the last example of working on it internally was the Havelock decision in Ontario, attempting to get recognition of the status of discrimination in Ontario. That decision happened in November 2022.
Yes, and that's my next letter to Bob Ray will be, I'll send him a copy of my submission, and
okay.
I'm going to get after him for this, but it's going to happen after the summer,
okay,
closer to the time of November.
Okay, that's good.
I like to kind of put them together.
At good timing,
Um,
yes.
the summertime is not a time to get into this sort of thing. So,
That's
and it
true.
takes time. So
Yeah.
I'm going to do it in the fall. I'm still having some fun. I enjoy doing this. I know I enjoy uh, getting at politicians, and it's amazing the way they can wiggle around things that they just don't want to do.
Yes.
Lametti and Bob Ray, yeah,
Yeah.
and anybody else.
Okay. So on that thought, there's much to do in the road ahead. And I want to thank you very much, Renton, for this interesting conversation. Hopefully, introducing people to the various aspects of this issue and how it affects humanism and secularism in Canada, and the recognition of this form of human rights infringement that Canadians seem to be sort of blind to because it's written into our Constitution.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you
Okay.
very much.
Thank you very much.
Any exposure about this is good.
Okay. Any other
And
final thoughts?
I'm so happy to have you fellows
Okay.
doing what you're doing.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Praise
Perfect.
to the highest.
Okay.
I'm all alone here, so
Oh well, maybe not for long. If we can get other people to get concerned about this.
yes. Yeah,
Okay.
we need that.
Yes, we do. Thanks
Okay,
again.
well,
And
thank you.
okay, we'll talk soon.
Okay. Bye for now.
Bye now.
Yeah.